Hey, Miami sports fans. Stop by Caneswear today at 2655 South University Drive in Davie, Florida. And check out their awesome merchandise selection of your favorite South Florida sports teams. From the Miami Dolphins, Hurricanes, Heat, Marlins, Florida Panthers, and Inter Miami, they've got it all. Celebrate your favorite team and show off your fandom with their beautiful team starter jackets, killer-looking helmets, team jerseys, cool shirts, and more. And if you're out of town or out of state, no worries. Go to caneswear.com and find everything they have on their site. Select what you want, and they will ship your gear to you. Anything over $99 is shipped for free. Don't wait. Stop at Caneswear today.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Real Talk. Wait a minute. Steve and Rob couldn't go tonight, so tonight we are bringing you Fins Talk Overtime, and I am joined once again by Greg Miney. Going to go over the draft with you guys. I'm excited about it. I'm not quite as high as everybody else, but I'm excited about this draft. I'm excited to go over it with Greg, and I'm excited to talk about it. So first and foremost, Greg, how are you tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. Had a very busy weekend with draft and other things going on. So, it's just one of those things. But, man, there was not a moment to spare this weekend. Let's put it that way. So
I'll tell you this weekend was a little rough on me. If you see me wincing, my back is a little tweaked. I was doing the flower bed Saturday with the wife, and I actually lost track of time and didn't see it was our pick. I knew the draft was going on, but I lost track of the picks. And thank you to Steve Malloy for texting me about Jalen Wright. He asked me if he's a fit, and I was like, oh, crap, we drafted him. So as you can see, I like that pick. But it was definitely an interesting weekend, and on that, I'm going to crack one open. So we got some stuff to talk about. Some picks I like, some picks of just head scratcher, and some that people didn't like. Let's go over to. I'm going to just kind of run through them real quick. Chop Robinson. I know there's a lot of hate because he didn't draft the guard, but let me tell you, you don't draft for need, and you get the best player available. And Greg, like you always say, let's get an impact position. And at least if they're going to be wrong, at least be wrong trying to go out there at impact position. I still would have liked Brian Thomas there, but I don't hate this pick at all. Patrick Paul was the head scratcher for me. Still very, very raw project. Jalen Wright trading up for the running back is what surprised me because that's not Greer's MO. So I like that. I also am a fan of Jalen Wright. I liked what I saw from him. Mohamed Kamara, I do think there is a role for him in an Andrew Van Ginkel style. Malik Washington, I do think he can make an impact early on. I think he has definitely has some juice, and he is a very reliable receiver. McMorris, to me, is camp body special teamer as well as Taj Washington. But notice a trend of doubling up, old Bill Parcells philosophy. Overall, day 3 should be a strong day. Getting depth, but it really seems like this whole draft was mainly depth more than anything. So, and Raphael, I really hope Chop is not the next Charles Harris. Oh my goodness. But I can see why you say that. So let's get into it, Greg. I mean, who was your favorite picks? Who was the ones you head scratchers? And let's start with that.
Well, I do like Chop Robinson. I like the idea of Chop Robinson. I'm hoping he's going to be a specialty pass rusher. Okay. He has the ability, the athletic ability to get after the quarterback. And I think you can never have enough of those players. But one of the things that you said about the draft is that this looks like a depth draft. All right. And one of the things that to me is a little bit disappointing in the draft is I don't know where the snaps are coming from. I don't know who's going to play 50% of the snaps on offense or defense. There's just, all right, Chop is going to be a pass rush specialist this year. The second round pick, Patrick Paul, he's not playing tackle unless somebody gets hurt.
Yeah.
Okay. He's probably not suited to step in and play right guard right now. So I'm not sure where he's going to fit on the field. Jalen Wright. I like the idea of Jalen Wright, but again, is he going to take snaps from Mostert? Is he going to take snaps from Achane? Mm-hmm. There's only a finite number of carries and receptions out of the backfield. Is he going to be able to break into that? I'm hoping he is. I think he can bring something a little bit different to the backfield. So I'm hoping that he does get there.
I think he will. I really think he will, especially with the injury history of our running backs. I think he's not going to have a choice, to be honest with you.
And I'm hoping Kamara works. All right. I like his tape. I don't like his body. All right.
Yeah.
And, a 6'1" defensive end pass rusher tends to get swallowed up, by the larger, longer armed defensive tackle. Offensive tackles. I'm sorry.
Especially guys who are power rushers who basically head down, drive you back.
Yes. So I like the idea of him. I hope he works out. I hope all these guys work out. It's just there's just some pause. I'm not sure the wide receivers see the field. I'm not sure if McMorris sees the field.
I don't think he will. Maybe on special teams at most.
Yeah, and those are I'm just not sure where the snaps are coming from. The good teams, the teams that get far in the playoffs, have rookie contributions and rookie contributors at a high level. I just don't see that in this draft right now. And with the talent that was lost in free agency and the talent that they got back in free agency, I still think there's a talent deficit from 2023. And I'm not sure how this draft fills that deficit in talent, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. So something I've been wanting to touch on here, because excuse me while I'm just finishing up with a couple notes here. So, and we'll get into undrafted free agents here in a little bit. Something I want to touch on with that. So the snaps thing, and this is not a set in stone. So we know Chubb and Phillips are coming off of major injuries. Phillips is coming off of that Achilles, and that usually takes guys a calendar year to come back from. Now he's familiar with coming back from injury. He knows how to take care of his body. He's serious about his body. That's one thing I love about Phillips. He takes care of his body, and he understands that, hey, in order to avoid getting injured all the time, I need to take care of it. And so he's going to do a good job. He's going to come back. And McDaniel is very good about protecting his players for the most part, so he's not going to rush them back. So I can see guys getting like Robinson and Kamara might be that like kind of perfect situation in a sense that they might get snaps early, and they might not be pretty snaps early, get the bumps and bruises out at the beginning of the season, and maybe start getting the veteran presence. And then once Chubb and Phillips really get back in their groove, those guys are now like this pass rush specialist, kind of the rotation. And the reason why I like the Robinson pick, and I want to emphasize this, is you can't have enough pass rushers. Is Chad Robinson going to be elite? I don't know. But Miami went after two edge rushers. They doubled up the old Bill Parcells philosophy at wide receiver and edge impact positions. I did like that. I did like the philosophy that they have for this draft and the positions that they went after. So I will agree. They went after some difference makers, so I do like that. Are they the right difference makers? We're going to find out. Now, to your point about the playing time, especially at wide receiver, we don't know. And especially with Tua, he likes to get to his first two reads, and then he likes to find his dump offs, and that's it. So will those guys get time? And there's a lot of uses for these guys, but we've also seen Tyreek take himself out and Cedric Wilson come in. And even though Cedric Wilson was schemed open, what happened? And not good things, in my opinion. So it almost seems like they're trying to duplicate the abilities of Waddle and Tyreek the best that they can.
Yeah, and
Agreed.
Tariq and Waddle, Waddle, some of it is due to injury and things like that. But Waddle didn't play 60% of the snaps last year, and Hill basically just barely played 60% of the snaps. Cedric Wilson played 50% of the snaps.
Yeah. They actually play a lot more than people realized. They
need that third wide receiver to be effective and to eat up some snaps. Mm-hmm. Hill and Waddle are going to take themselves out. That's I don't like it so much, but it's kind of the nature of the NFL now. They take themselves out of plays. So we need that third wide receiver. I'm not sure it's going to be one of these three, or one of the ones that are drafted. I'm still expecting them to sign another wide receiver come June 1st.
Yeah, I expect that too.
So I'm not sure where those are where the snaps are gonna come from. Maybe they're special teamers. When they're drafted that late, you're kind of hoping that they are special teamers.
Right.
Maybe
they can be a returner or something.
Correct. The same with the Kamara and maybe Chop as well. I think they're going to have to contribute on special teams to make the 45-man roster.
And I think Kamara does. I feel like Kamara is that kind of guy who would do anything the coach is going to ask him to do. He's going to just do it. He has that motor. It's in a sense the mind of Wilkins, kind of like that mentality. He's just going to give you 100% at all times. And I like that.
And there's nothing wrong with that. All right. No. It's just when you come to the game day roster makeup, you got to make decisions. Mm-hmm. You only get to 45. You get basically 21 on offense, 21 on defense, and then the three special teamers, right? So you're probably not keeping 5 edges on a game day roster.
Absolutely.
All right. 100%. You're going to have at least 4 defensive tackles. And you're going to have 5 linebackers, and you're probably going to have 7 or 8 DBs when it's all said and done, because your DBs and linebackers are your special teams players as well. So unless somebody like Kamara, unless somebody like Robinson gets more field time on special teams, when Phillips and Chubb come back, they're going to be on there. Shaq Barrett's going to be on the game day roster. Yep. So they're fighting for one spot on that game day roster, unless there's a special teams play there, and unless they're keeping fewer DBs or fewer linebackers and so on and so forth. So again, I'm not displeased with the positions they took. I wouldn't have went with Paul in the second round, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But I'm just not sure where the snaps are, and my big concern is that they're still at a talent deficit compared to 2023.
That's the hard part.
Huh?
That's the hard part.
That's the hard part, and we've talked about it. The one position I really wish they would have, kind of sold all out for is that running back. And maybe it is right. I mean, I looked and, Pacheco was the 7th round pick for Kansas City a couple years ago. Maybe we can get, find something like that. But yeah, there's still work to be done from a talent perspective on this roster.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And the thing that people need to see is when we say that the talent deficit, we're not saying that they didn't get better or they didn't replace this position, that position, because you have to replace production. Okay. So when you're looking at the Dolphins roster, a defensive tackle, okay, well, who's going to make up Wilkins' production? Right, so is it going to be a linebacker? Is it going to be another defensive tackle? I mean, you can find defensive tackles to kind of play that role, play the run really well, but who's going to take that leadership role? Who's going to take that accountability role?
Is it going to look the same as it did last year? All right. Mm-hmm. The reason why Wilkins and Sealer played as much as they did, for the most part, was because they're pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay. So I still expect Sealer to be in there in pass rush situations.
Absolutely.
But now that you don't have Wilkins and maybe you don't have that second defensive tackle pass rusher, maybe you line up, with Shaq Barrett inside or Chubb rushing a guard and Barrett on the outside with Phillips or something like that.
And they even mentioned Chop Robinson coming down the middle like he did in college. That speed package that they had Koamishi doing, and you can get a little creative, and that is why I like having multiple pass rushers. But I guess we'll see what Weaver's plan is. But overall, there's still a hole at defensive tackle. Not a big fan of the moves they made there. Post June 1st, I've said this draft on the surface is not terrible. It's definitely depth. It's definitely quality depth that I think we can all agree that we needed. We definitely needed some depth all over, and maybe it can help elevate that level of play underneath. But I think the one thing, basically consider this like NBA improving your bench, your young bench is kind of how I look at this. A possibility too, anyway. But June 1st, post June 1st money is going to tell me more about the direction of this team this year than anything else. We have a lot of money post June 1st, and I want to see what direction they go. And do they add, do they fill a couple holes there and have a very competitive camp? Because that's where we really need to see like the competition. And I want to see a good player like cut and say, man, I can't believe it. And just to see like everybody underneath that made the roster, like just make an impact. That's the kind of team I want to see us be. And the team's like, oh yeah, we'll take that guy you guys cut, but we made the right decision finally because, hey, look at these guys we have over here. We didn't need them. So good for him to go somewhere else. I want to see something like that, but I don't know that we can. Hopefully we do. But like you said, now with Jalen Wright, he's angry when he runs. He runs he's pissed off when he runs, and he's got the size. You talked about before you like that Nick Chubb. Now, he's not Nick Chubb, but he's got that compact size, that like 220, 200-plus pound, and he's physical when he runs. There is some limitations to his game, but he's also a willing pass blocker, which I love. That's something I absolutely love, and you and I talked about that before. I'm excited about him because I watched a little bit of him, but I'm curious of your take more.
I'm curious. I'll say it that way because one of the things that I would like to see Miami do offensively is, and we talked a little bit about this in Twitter chat. I'm a big fan when you have speed on the outside like Waddle and Hill. I'm a big fan of putting a defense in a bind with basically a big personnel group with the speed on the outside and seeing how the defense adjusts. Okay.
Yeah.
I love 6 offensive lineman sets. I love having a fullback in there. Okay. With a tailback that can basically punish people, and gain yards after contact, which I don't think the Dolphins have right now. Achane and Mostert, though they're just not that type of running back, right?
Achane, he runs stronger than he is and he's compact and gives you little to hit. But yeah, he doesn't give you that consistent power and run through tackles, even though he can. The only reason I say that is because some people have brought it up constantly. Well, he breaks tackles, but not consistently like Saquon Barkley or Josh Jacobs kind of thing.
Correct. One of those bigger, more physical running backs. Okay. And part of what I'd like to see is that 6 offensive linemen, bring in that extra tight end, bring in that fullback, and have the 2 wide guys out there basically running a 2-man route. Mm-hmm. All right. If the defense stays light, you pound them with your bigger your big offensive package. If they come in heavy, then you use your speed on the outside and put one player, one safety or something like that, and an either or read, and you can get a big play off of play action. All right. Aaron Rodgers used to kill people with that in Green Bay. All right. Because that was the type of offense that he was in. I think with Hill and Waddle, that would be really effective here. But
absolutely,
the defensive coordinators right now, even if Miami came out in a big personnel with Achane or Mostert as the running back, they don't really, they'd still go light. And they're still going to say, okay, I'm going to put a safety down in the box, and that safety is most likely going to tackle Achane or Mostert. You're not going to break that tackle. You're not going to punish us for going light, and I can still cover my speed, the speed that you put on the table. So those are the types of things that I wish we would see a little bit of, and I was kind of hoping we would get to. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, and I think Wright offers that, offers a more physicality that we don't have. And the one guy I'm still curious if he could have a role on this team is Chris Brooks. I'm not like heartbroken if he can't make the team, but I loved watching him block in a blocking role last year.
Yeah, he barely saw the field last year.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of the offensive philosophy. And and Daniel mentioned in the chat that they do have the physical running back in Wright. I just hope they use him. I'm hoping that he gets touches.
Mm-hmm.
If he gets 150 carries, I'll be happy. I'll be kind of surprised by it, but I'll be happy. And I think, and the only reason why he would get that many carries right now, in my mind, with McDaniel's offense, is because Mostert or Achane get hurt, and we don't want that.
I've noticed. Sorry, Greg, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was going to say, because in the way McDaniel has run his offense the first 2 years, that speed element is the one that he wants above and beyond everything else. And I think that favors Mostert, and I think that favors Achane. I'd like, we talked about it before, I'd like to see him get a little bit more physical. I think that starts at running back, to be honest, not the offensive line.
Yeah.
And I would love to see Wright get touches. I just don't see it right now on the roster. And hopefully he surprises me, because I would love to add that physicality at running back to this offense. I think that would do more than anything else to take it to the next level.
I think it was the second fastest back, I think.
He's a speed back in this draft.
Yeah, and he's powerful too. And that's the thing I liked about him is I saw someone comparing to Kamara, and I thought it was very lazy because it was a Tennessee thing. And Kamara runs hard for a little back, but he's different than Kamara. He's stronger, he's more physical, but he's explosive, and I would love it. And I think he's a great fit in this system. And first of all, Scotty, Daniel, Raphael, everybody, thank you for tuning in, commenting, and joining in the conversation. We really appreciate it. But he's, in my opinion, he offers everything that we're looking for. Here, something I started digging into the different coaching staffs, and I started looking at the McVay, and I started looking at Shanahan, and then I started looking at when the Broncos went on their run with Kubiak, and I started noticing something. A couple weeks ago, you and I talked about the Dolphins, and we talked about some of their issues they have late in the season. And you talked about how they're built. They're built for speed, as you just touched on. And they're not physical enough. And to get into the cold weather games, and Tua his arm is what it is. And in the cold weather games, you're going to have to get guys open, get creative, and start relying on a run game. And I started doing some digging, and I started to see that the Rams on their Super Bowl run, both of them, started relying on the run game. The Broncos with Kubiak started relying on the run game. Shanahan relied on the run game. All of these teams started relying on it later in the season as the time went on. And guys who didn't get touches very early in the season started getting more and more touches towards the end of the year. And I wonder if they would do that with Wright, because he's like the perfect back as he's learning the NFL, get some touches, and then him and Achane would be a nice one too. But him start getting the bulk of the load towards the end of the year with fresh legs.
Yeah, I if you have the running back to do it late in the year, ideally that's what's going to happen. No defense is going to approach Miami, especially late in the year, especially if they're primarily a zone defense. All right, nobody's going to stack the box to stop the run. Not with Hill and Waddle on the outside. Mm-hmm. All right, it's just way too dangerous. You don't want those two to be, man on man with any defensive back.
You're asking for trouble.
You're asking for trouble if you do that, right? So the issue Miami's running game had at the end of the year, in my opinion, wasn't because the O-line all of a sudden couldn't block any better than what they were in the beginning, anything like that. It was the defense was playing outside in. They were containing the running backs. They weren't putting any more in the box. They were just moving. They just moved the defense around a little bit. All right. So they didn't allow. They were trying not to allow Mostert and Achane to get outside. And once you bring them in between the tackles a little bit, they lose their effectiveness. They're not as there's not as much space in there for them to make people miss. And when they tried to run people over or break tackles, they weren't very successful at doing it. So the defense just basically widened out. It didn't really change a whole lot. We can argue like starting in the Dallas game, the Tennessee game, and even the Kansas City game at the end of the year, Buffalo, they were playing more zone, but again, they weren't stuffing the box. The Miami Dolphins should have been able to run the ball better. It's not the type of running game that Miami had, and it's because they didn't have the type of running backs to make it successful, in my opinion. So it's a 6-1, half dozen to the other thing. If you're going to stick with the same running attack, you're going to have to do all kinds of different scheme things to make Mostert and Achane more available, or you can stay with the same attack, tweak it a little bit, and get a more physical runner in.
And that's where I think Wright comes in.
Yeah.
And but honestly, it might come down to the offensive line too.
Well, hopefully McDaniel sees it. Hopefully that's why they traded a valuable 3rd-round pick last year to move up to get Wright. Because my hope is that Miami's front office and coaching staff smart enough to see what essentially I'm seeing, in that they needed a different type of running back, a little more physical running back, in to do this type of stuff that we need to get to. So I'm hoping that is the case. Part of me just sits back though and says, yeah, it's just not McDaniel's nature to not have, the track meet on the field.
And that's something that I'm kind of frustrated with, because I'm like, I get it, flashy Miami, it's great and it's fun, and the Marx Brothers had it and all this stuff. But we need to get more physical, and I think it's going to start with the run game. I think it has to start with the run game, and I hope they see it. But I think some of the guys they had that they drafted have some physicality. And Jalen Wright, I think the day 3 guys seem to be more the physical guys. Believe it or not, Malik Washington, when you watch him, he's tough. He's small, but he's tough, and I love it.
And if you're gonna, building on what I said before about wanting to run outside, one of the things that defense have started to do is basically pick on our wide receivers who are blocking outside and really pinching in. All right. As soon as they saw run, they basically blew up our wide receivers on the blocking side of things. All right.
Absolutely.
Hill's not the best blocker in the world. Waddle's not the best blocker in the world. Berrios is Berrios and Craycraft. They try, but they're not very physical. So it's hard to run outside in this offense without some kind of edge protection. All right. Why is San Francisco really good at it? Okay. Debo and Brandon Ayuk are beasts out there, and they block they block like hell. I mean, they move people, they move DBs, and gives McCaffrey all kinds of stuff. And George Kittle's probably the best blocking tight end in the game, so that doesn't help, that doesn't hurt your cause, but you need to be able to set that edge in this type of running game. And Durham Smythe, I like him. He's an okay blocker. I think they can improve there. I'm hoping Smith does. And one of the undrafted free agents, Rucci, the tight end out of Wisconsin, he can block.
Yep. And tight end.
Yeah, tight end. And I'm hoping that he has a role on this team as well. If we're not going to use them as pass catching threats that much, I would, I think our tight ends need to do a better job of blocking.
So here's the thing. Let's talk about some of the undrafted free agents. As Raphael pointed out, the Dolphins definitely have had plenty of success on undrafted free agents. We're talking guys like Devon Bess. We're talking that now that I try to come up with them off the top of my head, it's hard to remember them all of them off the top of my head. But we have had a lot of luck with some undrafted free agents, right? And I think it definitely could come into play this year. It's almost like a guarantee every year that somebody from our undrafted free agents makes the roster. And no, they're not lights out, but they become a decent player, especially at the bottom of the roster. And I saw guys like Matthew Jones from Ohio State. I thought he would be drafted, but not really. Ohio State hadn't been putting out great offensive linemen here lately, but looking at guys like Bobby, he likes Grayson Murphy, the D lineman for UCLA. Definitely some potential there for depth. Definitely someone who could make the roster because, in my opinion, the front seven still has positions that are wide open to take. And then Matos at offensive tackle. Bobby's really interested in him. He's a total project. But see, I don't mind taking projects, undrafted free agents. It is what it is. To me, my favorite undrafted free agent is Mark Perry, the safety for TCU, because I think there's a lot of range with him. I think he can make a lot of plays and create problems. I think he can make the roster. And Hayden Rucci. And the reason that with Rucci is because last year we had Julian Hill, who I told you guys this before. I think he did a fantastic job as a rookie tight end blocking. Now, a lot of assignments were a little bit difficult for him, not understanding, oh, crap, when there's a difference, defenses change last second, defenses motion too, and they create issues, and he kind of got lost in the sauce a little bit, but it happens. That's just rookie stuff. But, man, when he blocked, he would just take your head off, and he was physical. And I talked about Jonnu Smith, who I believe is probably our best tight end at blocking in space. He's okay all the way around, pretty average all the way around, but he's probably better as a blocker than even as a receiver. And I think he offers a decent blocker in space. But Rucci, I think, can give you the guy to kind of seal the edge to where I also think that allows Jonnu Smith to get to the second level, which does help the run game, especially for the outside zone runs, which that's going to help Mostert and Achane more than anything. And then, of course, that allows Ingle to kind of do what he does too. So I'm hoping that a guy like Rucci can make the roster because I think he's definitely an improvement at tight end over Smythe. And I said it before, Julian Hill, Hayden Rucci could be battling with Smythe for a spot too. Who knows? We'll see how that goes. But I don't think Smythe will go anywhere, but they could keep 3 tight ends.
Well, I think there's a possibility they're going to keep 4.
Very much so.
I would, maybe not all of them make the game day roster, but I think they'll have 4 on the 53 man. Mm-hmm. I'm really interested to see these DBs, to be honest with you, on the undrafted free agents. I think there are some roster spots to be had in the backfield and the defensive backfield for the Dolphins.
Absolutely.
I think there's maybe 2 or 3 53-man roster spots available, and they didn't really draft. They drafted McMorris in the 6th round. I'm not too high on him. I like some of the undrafted free agents better in the backfield, defensive backfield, than I do him. So I think there could be some UDFAs in the defensive backfield to make this team and especially contribute to the special teams.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the ones we've had our most success is finding cornerbacks late or undrafted, and
cornerbacks and safeties. I mean, you can never have too many of them on your roster, in my opinion. And,
especially for special teams, because safeties and corners, they offer so much versatility on special teams and then depth at the same time. And we've had quite a few special teams guys actually have to play on defense and do a good job for us. And it's something you want and you want to see.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Mark Perry's a guy. I really like him, maybe because he's just like what they used to call it, body beautiful. Like he's built like your brick house safety. Like he's 6 foot 215. Looks like he'll take your head off. He's got the physicality to him, and I'd love to see, especially if he could play like a nickel linebacker kind of thing, quarterback spot. That would be fantastic to have.
Yeah, and just as an aside, and things like that, I want Storm Duck to make this team because I think Storm Duck as a Dolphin would be great. Just to say that,
just the name.
Just the name. I love that.
I want him to make the team so I can have a fantasy team name that says "What the Duck." I always pick a fantasy football team name based on a Dolphin player. I usually try to do like a defensive player. I had Shake Awake for a while, Tsunami Earthquakes, and so you think you could dance me. So I just want like a "What the Duck" or something.
It's but in all seriousness, all those players can run. Okay. They're all on the faster side for the position. Even the linebackers that we've taken, they can all run according to all the draft stuff that I've read. So speed is not going to be a problem. It's just, can we play with a little bit of physicality at those positions? And, can we make some special teams players out of these guys? But me and you have talked about this for 2 years now, 3 years now, or however long it is. The third day of the draft and the undrafted free agents is where I give Greer a lot of credit for finding some people.
Yeah.
It's those first 2 days that, just have me scratching my head most of the time. So.
And you know what? I said this. Patrick Paul feels like a typical Chris Greer offensive line pick. And Laramie Tunsil, give Greer credit for being prepared and doing the homework and know when he fell in his lap. Like, I'm not worried about the gas mask thing because you had like last minute scrimmage. So I'll give him credit to say, hey, I'm comfortable with that. I'll take him. That to me, that took a lot more guts than people realize. But that was a no-brainer with Tunsil for talent-wise. He was a can't-miss prospect. He just had all the tools. Yeah. And elite or not, he was still a hard-to-miss tackle. Everybody could see he was going to be. Jackson was definitely overdrafted. Honestly, at the level he plays, you could find someone like that in late day 2. Hunt was a good second-round pick, overall solid. And these guys aren't terrible, like you said before. You can live with them; they do their job. But Liam Eichenberg, terrible feet, terrible hand placement. And Patrick Paul isn't that bad. He's athletic. He's got the size. But he reminds me a lot of Austin Jackson, where he's very athletic, but just very raw. At least got him in the second round, though.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this on previous casts and things like that. The other people place bigger emphasis on the O-line than I do. Just think about it this way, right? There were 15 offensive linemen taken in the first 2 rounds of this draft by 14 teams. One team took 2 offensive linemen in Pittsburgh. All right. There's 25 taken after 3 rounds, by 22 teams, and 3 took, 2 offensive linemen within the first 3 rounds.
Yeah.
There's such a shortage of good offensive linemen that every team reaches to pick them. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to take your Patrick Pauls. You're going to have to take all these other guys just basically on physical skills and hope they develop and hope that they just are decent. Okay. You're not finding maybe 1 or 2 studs out of these first 25. You're just not. All right.
Absolutely.
There's 25 taken. You're going to be lucky to have a dozen of them start. Okay. In the first
people
3
don't
rounds.
Understand that aspect too. When Greer said there's not 21 first-round picks in this draft, what people have to understand is when you do a grading system, first-round grades are not something you just hand out to 32 players.
Right.
I've done it, graded where I've only had like 6 or 7 guys that had a first-round pick, 20 guys, 10 guys. It really depends. But no one has.
And it just, the point that I made on our first podcast together was, there's not enough good offensive linemen for every team to have a good offensive line. So all offensive line, if you approach it from all offensive lines are bad, okay, because there's going to be 1 or 2 positions in almost every offensive line that aren't very good, all right, that you're looking to replace. And like I said, 22 teams drafted somebody in the first 3 rounds, okay, in this draft to fix their offensive line.
Right.
So, if you think about it like that, your backup guys aren't going to be any better. All right. So you're drafting depth and you're drafting development.
Yeah.
And, I wanted a second round pick in this draft to be an immediate player for the Dolphins.
And there were
Patrick
some there.
Ball's not that person. Okay. So, I hope he develops. I hope he's a player. He's only got 4 years to for Miami to get anything out of him. So I'm hoping that this first year, he learns something so that he's productive the next 3. And maybe then we can avoid not having to spend, I was doing some research, over the weekend, because I'm a dork and I like football, right? Since this rebuild has begun, 2019 through 2024 now, Miami has signed 21 different offensive linemen to free agent contracts. In the first 3 rounds, they drafted 5 players. So one of the things that bugs me about it is, when I hear Dolphin fans say, what have they done to address the offensive line? It's 26 players in 6 years, that you brought into the fold to try to help this offensive line.
And how many do they keep whiffing on? They've whiffed on so many, and it's frustrating. And
but even on all of the whiffs, okay, and everything else, they had the leading passer in the league last year.
Mm-hmm.
They had a running back, basically lead the league in rushing. All right, they ran the ball average to the league. The league, had wait a minute, I got that number here. Just 1 second. So Miami had a total of 456 rushes last year. The league average was 456. So, all right. I mean, so they literally were, average attempts.
Hang on. I'm told that they didn't run the ball enough and they stopped running the football.
They stopped running the ball. I don't know. People are saying that because they just want to say that. All right. And, it's not necessarily true. Maybe their effectiveness went down running the ball, but there are so many things that contribute to that you can't say it's a lack of attempts.
Well, so when you look at the Dolphins, Anthony, I see your comment. Let me think about it for a minute, and I'll get to you on that one. So let's look at this. The Dolphins ran the ball. I'm going to loop this to the draft. The Dolphins ran the ball at the league average. And people say that they took the running game or they stopped running the ball. Well, what I was trying to explain before, the closer they got to, you and I talked about this, the closer they got to the end zone, the less they could run the ball because the less effective Waddle and Hill speed was, right? So now all of a sudden it's pinched the field. And what, like you said earlier, DBs are starting to pinch in. And that's when you start seeing the effectiveness of the run game starting to get hurt a little bit. And it was a slippery slope because your blocking had to be just right. It had to be good in order for it to be a good run. And Mostert, he was a good back, had a good season. But the reality is it was tough to create a run game without like the motions and without the speed on the outside. And that's where things happen. This is where Jalen Wright, where I think the vision is, McDaniel wanted a guy who could be like him, who could get downhill and play more inside zone. So when they start pinching in, they can run some inside zone or hit them outside zone and start making the defense have to think about, they can hit us up the middle. And you saw they closed the game out with Jeff Wilson with more inside zone running, which was nice to see against Dallas and some outside zone. So what I really want to see more is what I'm hoping is that Wright gives them that run game that they're looking for in the short yardage or the short field, I should say.
Well, and the defenses that Miami played after Dallas went to town on what Jeff Wilson did on that last drive. All right. Dallas pinched everybody inside thinking it was going to be inside runs, and Jeff Wilson basically did a little bounce. All right. He'd start inside, bounce outside, and basically got some edges. All right. what was happening toward the end of the year was defenses weren't giving up the edges. They were basically begging Miami to run inside, run between the tackles. And to the point where I think McDaniel was actually calling inside zone runs, but Mostert and Achane kept wanting to bounce.
Achane especially did bounce it a lot.
And it wasn't, they weren't patient enough inside to make the runs effective. So as a coach, when you're seeing that as your players, you can bring them to the bench. You can say, look, you got to stick with it. You got to stay with your blockers. You got to stay inside, things like that. Players, when they get out on the field, they vapor lock some of that, and they just don't do it. So if you're McDaniel and you're seeing your guys doing this over and over again, you're not going to call it on a 3rd and 2 play an inside zone because you think they're going to flatten and they're going to get caught.
Yeah.
So then you're going to get yelled at because you ran the ball on 3rd and 2 on it with Achane, who's not a power running back, and you called an inside play who had, things like that. So it's kind of a no-win situation. But
it is.
If Wright can be the guy to get hit in the hole, win, and fall forward for 2 yards, that will be a big improvement for the running game. A big improvement.
Absolutely.
I'm hoping he gets the touches to prove that out.
Now, touch on Anthony's point. He asked who was an offensive tackle that we think could have let me get back to his point here. I want to make sure I read this right. When you look at this class, who was the best traits in terms of development that you feel might be a future Pro Bowl or All Pro? Well, if you're talking offensive talent, I think Patrick Paul does have a lot of talent here. But I also think Blake Fisher had a lot of talent. I did like the guy that the Ravens took, and Roger Rosengarten and Kingsley Sumat. I don't know how to say his name, from BYU. So I did like all those guys. But I did like Rosengarten probably the best. He's definitely got some mean streak to him. I'm not saying Patrick Paul can't develop. I'm not saying that at all. I think he can. I think he's got potential. Even Brandon Coleman from TCU that the Commanders took in the next round. I think those guys definitely have potential. So I think there's some talent there. It's just, in my opinion, I think what Greg is saying, we could have had a guy like, I don't know, Jonathan Bullard, Javon Bullard, Cole Bishop. Those guys could have started right away. Get an offensive tackle, period. And I'm not saying for need. Okay, so that's not what I'm saying here. But I think those guys could have definitely filled in and made an impact right away, especially Bullard. Bullard from Georgia as a ball hawk in the secondary. And I think the Dolphins, I think in the second round, they weren't really looking aggressive there. I think that was a Greer pick. I do also think it was a McDaniel pick too, but that's definitely a future pick. That was definitely, they did say they wanted to draft Armstead's replacement, and that's what they did. And great. However, he hopefully works out, because the other guys they drafted for the future haven't worked out or took forever to develop. And it's like there were guys sitting right there that could play and improve your roster right away. Yeah. And they didn't take advantage of that. And that was my frustration.
And
I agree.
My frustration with the player that, with Paul, the player is, when you drafted Austin Jackson in the first round, he played guard, for a little bit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
He was always going to be a tackle, but he played guard. Miami needed to draft a player and put him in guard for a little bit. All right.
Like Tunsil. They did that with Tunsil.
They did that with Tunsil as well. I just felt that there were better players for the Paul pick to be able to do that and probably contribute right away. Blake Fisher for Notre Dame, I think he went in the next pick after we took Paul, the next offensive lineman.
I believe so.
Yes. For Notre Dame. Now, I am a Notre Dame fan. I watched a lot of his football. I think he could have played guard a little bit before moving out to tackle. All right. The kid from BYU is another one that could probably be a pretty good guard.
And I think he's probably a good pick because Andy Reid usually pretty good at finding the offensive lineman.
Yeah, exactly. And so I just that pick bugged me on a couple levels because I probably wouldn't have gone offensive tackle there anyway. But the person that they picked as well, he's basically going to sit this year unless there's an injury to Jackson, and there's got to be essentially 3 injuries at offensive tackle for him to play, in my opinion. And that's not something that you want from a second round pick.
And I'm not sure that he would have been. I know I didn't have a whole lot. I didn't grade this year, but just watching what I watched, I don't know that he would have been a higher grade if I was going to go offensive tackle there. I don't know that I would have put him over like a guy like Rosengarten, who was one of my favorite ones out of Washington, or the safeties. I don't think he would have been higher. Like you said, I agree. I think Rosengarten and Blake Fisher, I think both of them could have been guards right away. But, then again, we could be wrong. Maybe he turned out to be a stud offensive tackle. It's hard to say. Again, I don't hate it, but their track record of finding offensive linemen, I don't feel good about it either. And for what I've watched of him, his feet are all over the place. His punch is all over the place. He catches pass rushers, so it bothers me a little bit.
He's a long-armed offensive tackle. Those guys are a little bit different from your traditional tackle when you in the pass blocking. All right, they do things a little bit different, and you got to teach them a little bit different. I'm okay with that. It's just, again, I said it's sort of at the beginning of the show that Miami, in my opinion, has a talent deficit compared to last year. They needed to make up some things, and this was another spot that I felt that they could have got some maybe potentially immediate production out of. If you're going to take offensive linemen in the second round, and you need a guard, you need, and I'm fine drafting a tackle and playing them at guard. All right. You need the athletic ability of offensive tackles from college to play guard in the NFL. Okay. That's why there's so many offensive tackles taken. All right. A lot of them get bumped down because they have to have that athletic ability.
Yep.
So, I'm fine with that, but it's just not this guy. And then you start thinking about it a little bit more. He's not going to play over Armstead. He's probably not going to play over Lamb, and he's definitely not going to play over Jackson. All right. Yeah. So those 3 guys need to get hurt for him to get on the field, it looks like, in my opinion.
And that's frustrating.
That is frustrating.
And I like guys that get out there, take their lumps early if they can. Like if you're going to be a future offensive lineman for me, I'd rather get you out there and get you used to the NFL game right away.
Right. Yeah.
See how you do.
You got him under contract for 4 years, and you're basically giving him a red shirt the first year. So, again, that weakens that position. That weakens the need for that position, in my opinion. All right. You want to maximize your cheap production as much as you can in the first 3 rounds of the draft. And if you got to automatically sit one of them, for 1 year, that makes that position and that player less valuable.
Yeah. And to be fair to Greer and the Dolphins on this one, this draft was a top-heavy draft, and they did say that teams felt that they wanted to get the guys that they wanted to get, so they had no problem moving up to grab the players that they wanted and just grab them where they were, even if it was above where they're comfortable taking them, because this draft is identify your guys, get your guys, and that's going to be your draft. Sometimes it's just the way the draft is. It's like thin on talent. And so I'm just hoping that they identified the guy. I think my hang up really is that their history of offensive linemen has not been good. It's been terrible. So they've had like 2 good hits, 3. I'll give them Jackson. And that's all they've had. A lot of them been bad.
Well, they did, Jackson and Hunt, and they've actually done some pretty good drafts, and I know we were running out of time here, and we got a couple more minutes to go, but I got to do my dig at Greer. All right,
do it.
I've held my tongue for 55 minutes of this year podcast. I got to do a little bit of digging here. All right, because I love after drafts, and this has happened for years now. Okay,
Drafted 7 Pro Bowlers. Oh, sorry.
Well, it's not.
All right,
It's not only
realistically
that.
5.
Okay, all right. But it's Greer is the magician that just he stays. He never gets fired. He never because every bad pick, is associated with the head coach. Him wanting to please the head coach, but every good pick is Greer's. Okay.
Yeah.
So Christian, this before the draft, it was, well, Chris Greer is obviously good at drafting because, Christian Wilkins and Robert Hunt and all these players made big money, this year, and so on and so forth. Okay. Because they were in free agency. So they had to be good picks. Okay. So was Christian Wilkins, then you hear afterwards about some of the picks in this draft, and you hear it after every draft, well, that was obviously a head coach pick. All right. Chris Greer picked him because of the head coach wanted him. Well, what is it? Okay.
Yeah. A-Chan was definitely a McDaniel pick because McDaniel got pissed off. He couldn't give him a second. And they're like, chill out. And then in the 3rd round, they got him.
Yeah.
And so I guess Greer was smart there to wait till the 3rd. But again, this year, I think Chop Robinson, McDaniel pushed for because he likes edge rushers, which thank you, offensive coach, for liking edge rushers.
Yes.
I love that.
So, but it just cracks me up because the hypocrisy of it for some of us, is like, well, Brian Flores didn't want Tua. Okay, so Chris Greer wanted Tua, but Brian Flores want Christian Wilkins as the first pick in his regime? I think that's probably true. So if that's the case, was it Chris Greer doing the work, or was it not? So it just cracks me up. But my bigger problem in general is I agree that you should always draft for best player available, regardless of your board, things like that, right? You got to have certain positions elevated over other positions, especially early in the draft, how you set your board up, and that's fine. Chris Greer likes to sign what I call middling veteran free agents before the draft to make sure that basically he has everything covered so that he's available for free agents, for the draft to basically pick the best player available.
Yeah.
But he also falls back on not picking impact players because, I'll take a project here because I have this veteran who can fill in the gap until he gets better. And again, I've said this over and over and over again, the championship teams get cheap production out of draft picks, and Miami hardly ever gets cheap production, especially out of their rookie class.
Yeah.
And it's really frustrating to see that that's probably going to happen again this year. I just don't see the snaps. I don't see these guys. I don't see anybody that was drafted, undrafted free agent, getting 50% of the offensive or defensive snaps. I just don't.
And how many guys keep sitting? And it's one thing a group likes to draft projects and for the future. Great, but you can't always rely on that. And that's my biggest gripe is fantastic. Cam Smith might be a player. Channing Tindall was a project. We know we're not getting anything out of Channing Tindall. Right. Look at all the linebackers they signed. He keeps getting buried just like he did at UGA. So there's a lot of guys that they're athletic, they're talented. Tindall, athletic and talented, hasn't got on the field. So is Patrick Paul going to be the same way? Athletic and talented, but can't get on the field, can't play. Who knows?
And if you felt strongly about Cam Smith being your number 2 cornerback, why did you sign the guy in free agency to come in and basically be the starter? Okay.
Yeah.
It's just we keep doing things to basically minimize the impact of the draft picks, and it's the same bad scenario over and over and over again, in my opinion. We just don't get enough out of the draft.
Yeah,
and we really don't.
And this is our first round pick with Mike McDaniel, and I don't hate it at all. And I think I think the positive side is you have constant pass rushers, and rotation is fantastic. And Chop Robinson offers a speed rush, but again, not the bulk load. But pass rusher, I can accept that just simply because you want rotation there. So I can accept that. I can accept he's a
Right.
Bruce Irvin type right away. So, I'll accept that. Patrick Paul, to me, is kind of a waste of a pick for now. In the future, maybe not. Maybe we won't even look at that. Jalen Wright, he might actually make things right. Ha! See what it did.
I
So
see
we'll
what
see
you
what
did there.
happens. But we're gonna dig into it more the more film we watch and the more the time goes on. Really looking forward to over this next month to see if they sign Tua, opening up money, signing more players, and come June 1st, what they do. That's going to be the tell-all really for us. And then when we start getting close to camp, that's when for me it gets exciting because then I start digging in. Okay, who do I think is going to make the team? And then how do I tweak that 53? How am I seeing it from there? And then how close I am and evaluating the team. And I'm hoping that we have some surprises, and that's my biggest hope. Because the draft, I think there's potential, but again, for future. So, final words, Greg.
No, it was fun. I love the draft. It's one of my favorite weekends of the NFL calendar. It's just you're pumped for it every year as a Dolphin fan, and every year I'm kind of just like, God, I wish it was better. All right,
Yeah.
I just wish they're just So I'm hoping that the June 1st stuff breaks our way. We should have some money. I think there's still some good players out there to get.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping to make up some of that talent deficit. Not everybody agrees with me, but I just think that there's still more work to be done to get as talented as the 2023 season roster was.
I think the interior of the lines, I think, is definitely has holes that need to be filled in post June 1st. I'm crossing my fingers for Dalton Reisner at guard to kind of solidify the interior offensive line. That would be good, just to give us a solid veteran in there. That's all you would need there. And I'm hoping to improve D tackle room, which for some reason I have a feeling they won't. But definitely competition at safety would be nice.
I'd like to see more. I'd like to see more safety. I'd like to see another linebacker potentially, and I'd like to see DT and I think they're going to get another wide receiver. I think there's going to be a veteran, wide receiver that's going to come in here and probably be that third.
I'm hoping it's. We'll see what happens. I don't hate OBJ, but I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But that's it for us, guys. Thank you, all of you guys, for tuning in. I appreciate it. Anthony, Scotty. Anthony, hit me up on Twitter. I'll try to answer that question for you. Raphael, Anthony, Scotty, Daniel, Duke, all you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate it. Until next time, guys, fins up. Forget that.
Fins up.